So, normally I start with a joke or a funny story to a homily, but I'm not going to this week because it's been in this area quite a sad week and quite a somber one. You probably saw it on the news, it's been all over the news, the local news particularly, that on Thursday, about 3:20 p.m, outside the McDonald's at Stratford Centre, a young boy, 15 years old, was stabbed and killed, along with a friend who was severely injured. Now, it seems that we hear this news all the time, don't we, these days? It just happens again and again and again. And from our armchairs, we can kind of like shake our heads and maybe we can talk about it and say how bad it is. But when it hits really close to home, then it makes us really think. And what hit close to home for me this week with this boy, Baptista, lived in North Woolwich, so that's in our parish, and he's a Bonds boy. He went to St Bonaventure's School, 15 years old, in year 11. I mean, how do you respond to that? The next day, I went into St Bonaventure's School. I didn't know what to do or what to say, but you just feel like you need to be there, And I witnessed such heroism from the teachers and the students on that day. The atmosphere was very somber, as you can imagine, but through tears in their eyes, these teachers were holding it together because they were devastated, holding it together for these boys. And they talked about how their faith makes them strong and helps them to respond positively to this. And all the boys, to a man, through tears in their eyes, were nodding their heads at this. And I think to myself, somewhere like within a mile of this place, there's a mum, who's lost her son. The indescribable pain of that. There's a boy who was in year 8 at St Bon's who's lost his brother. It's just beyond words. In the middle of this day, I was asked to celebrate a mass with the year 11s and some of their teachers, because obviously these boys knew Baptista really well. And so I said, of course, yeah. But I must admit, I think, and I was thinking then of a first communion class I did with parents a few days before. And I've been talking to the parents about how the Eucharist, the celebration of the Mass, is thanksgiving. That's what it means. To offer the Eucharist, to celebrate the Eucharist, is to offer thanks to God. And I'm thinking there, in this church, what do we have to thank God for right now? What does Baptista's mum have to thank God for? What do these boys and teachers have to thank God for? Today's Gospel might help us to process and understand why it is we thank God and what it is we thank Him for. You've got 10 lepers. Jesus is passing on the border between Samaria and Galilee. And these lepers are on the edge of their town. If you caught leprosy, it meant you were highly contagious. So you were put on the edge of the town and were excluded from all community activity. Now we can assume from the Gospel that 9 out of 10 of these men who were lepers were Jewish men, because it says there was one Samaritan. So we can safely assume that. Why was it such a bad thing, particularly for a Jewish man, for a Jewish person to be excluded from community? Because it was being excluded from your reason to live. To be a member of the people of Israel meant to have a unique vocation and calling in the whole world. Isaiah puts it like this: I will make you the light of the nations, so that my salvation may reach the ends of the earth. My bad spelling there. That my salvation may reach the ends of the earth. To be the holy people of God was to be chosen to reflect the light of God's love and mercy for the whole world. Israel's praise, Israel's worship, and Israel's thanks was the satellite to which all people were called to gather, so that all may worship the one true God. So the one reason for existing that these men had was taken away from them. And so you can hear it in their voice when they say, Jesus, take pity on us. We want to be returned so that we can have our reason for living back, to praise and thank God and be a beacon of light in the world. And Jesus takes pity on them. They go on their merry way. Jesus says, show yourselves to the priests to prove that they've been healed so they can return to worship. But only one of them turns around and actually goes back to Jesus. And what does he do? He falls down on his knees and worships God and thanks Jesus. 1 out of 10 does that. He shows us that our calling in life is a calling of thanksgiving, so that people may know the light of God's love in the world through us. That's what it means to be church. Look at what St. Peter says in his letter. But you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a consecrated nation, a people set apart to sing the praises of God, who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light. We are the people of God. We are called to be that light that burns in the darkness. What does it say in John's Gospel? The light came into the world, a light that the darkness could not conquer. Now we share in that light, and we give thanks to God that we have this calling and this opportunity to be that light in the darkness for the world, for others. Right now, it's all darkness for the family of Baptista. We can't imagine how dark it is. It was all dark for those boys at St. Bonaventure's school. It was all dark for the teachers. And yet they found it within themselves, in the midst of that darkness, to continue burning brightly. And that light that burns within him, that light of faith, is the hope of the world, that turns a great act of evil into a source of hope and opportunity for those who suffered from it. Think of the cross. Think of Jesus on the cross, the darkest moment in all of human history. And yet, because of the love that shone through on that cross, that death was taken down to the grave and risen to life. And that's why we get to thank Jesus for the life that he's given us. So whenever we ask ourselves, what do I have to thank God for? Thank God that you get to share in his light. And thank God that you get to be the light in the darkness for others. Because that is our vocation. And that is the hope of people like Baptista's family, for our school community, for our parish community, and indeed for the whole world. Amen.